Oh, yeah. Welcome, everyone. Cannabis News with Joe Klare. It is April 12th, 2018. Cannabis News presented by the Marijuana Times. Check us out at marijuanatimes.org. A bunch of great articles from a bunch of great writers. Also, every episode of Cannabis News can be found and easily shareable with your social media networks on marijuanatimes.org. Of course, check us out on Apple Podcasts as well. Search the Marijuana Times. Find the audio-only version of Cannabis News. Got a lot coming up today. News out of Maine. Possible, finally, progress out of Maine on the recreational legalization program there. Also, a breakdown of what's going on in California when it comes to cease-and-desist letters being sent out by California authorities to medical marijuana and recreational shops that are not licensed by the state. Those shops are now illegal. So they're getting letters telling them to shut down, and there's a lot of them. We'll tell you just how many. Coming up also, the latest out of Florida on their medical marijuana program. A new ruling from a judge could have major implications for how that program is put into place. I want to mention, before we get to everything else, that I mentioned on Monday's show, I believe it was, that I'm a little under the weather. That's persisted throughout the week. But again, as I always point out self-servingly, I'm here for you, bringing you the cannabis news, no matter what. Like the mailman, except, it's not going to snow or rain or any of that in here. But in any case, my point is, if I sound a little more annoying than usual, you can attribute it to that. My voice, not what I'm saying, but my voice. Before we get to all of those stories, I have to tell you, of course, the Cannabis News with Joe Klare is brought to you by NatureSideCannabis.com. Grow safe and poison-free with their organic, all-natural pesticides. NatureSideCannabis.com can help you become regulatory compliant in the state you're in. If you're growing legally, there are probably pesticide regulations that you have to abide by, and you want some organic, all-natural pesticides, and you want the expertise provided by the folks at NatureSideCannabis.com, a proud sponsor of Cannabis News. Go check them out because they're awesome. I wouldn't tell you they're awesome if they were not awesome. I wouldn't go through the whole rigmarole, as the kids say, if I wasn't bringing you if I wasn't keeping it 100. There you go. I think kids do still say that. Keeping it 100 here on Cannabis News. This first story is by Julia Granowitz over at marijuanatimes.org. Maine lawmakers move forward with plans to implement voter-approved retail cannabis sales. Many of you may remember that a year ago, a regulation bill covering recreational legalization and the program in Maine was passed last year, but it was vetoed by Governor Paul LePage. He cited concerns over how the Trump administration was going to handle the conflict between the state and federal laws. He was also worried about what was then the recent appointment of Jeff Sessions as U.S. Attorney General. A year later, just last week, a new bill was introduced. Actually, this week it was introduced, and this week it was passed. Some significant changes from the one last year, and of course from current laws. It has eliminated the ability to buy and consume cannabis in a social club, reduced the amount allowed from home growing from 6 plants to 3. It passed the House on Tuesday with a 112 to 34 vote, and it passed the Senate with a 24 to 10 vote. These are both margins that are necessary to override a veto if Paul LePage decides to veto again. They did not have the votes last year to override the veto in the Senate. State Rep Teresa Pierce, a Democrat from Falmouth and the House Chairwoman on the Marijuana Committee that crafted the bill, said, quote, "We worked hard to compromise and find common ground. Our town officials, our local businesses, our parents and families and communities, and each of us represent are all asking us to put a reasonable, highly structured regulatory system in place. They recognize the status quo just isn't what we should be doing." So, look, if it's less than what voters voted on and passed November 2016, and that sucks. There's no way to sugarcoat that. You would at least think that after everything the marijuana consumers and sellers and growers have gone through for no reason, because as I point out every show just about, the reason marijuana should be legal to grow, sell, and possess is because there's these people who are doing these things are not infringing on the rights of anyone else. After all of that, then the voters passed something which is reasonable, 6 plants, and still that's not enough because the governor who, in Maine didn't like legalization to begin with. He spoke out against it when it was a campaign, and then when it passed, he did everything he could to throw roadblocks in the way of this legalization bill, and now he's watered it down, even from the already really watered down version that voters passed in November 2016. So Paul LePage, he's got to be giddy. He wasted a year. They got to jump all through all these hoops. Some of the stuff I'm sure he didn't like. I'm sure he wanted the plant homegrown to be 0, but it's 3. So they moved back more towards his position, which is the position of prohibition. It was a step back towards prohibition from what the voters voted on. Be that as it may, it's better than nothing. Now, as the story points out, these businesses, these investors, the people who are counting on this industry can actually begin to see their plans come to fruition. Because even though it was legal to sell in Maine, no one had any licenses because there was no licenses to have because there was no regulations. So, at least in that way, it is moving forward. So, two steps back, one step forward. Something like that. But again, it is better than the limbo that the status quo that Maine is in right now. This next story is from mjbizdaily.com. They have a chart on there as a breakdown of California marijuana companies that got cease and desist letters. Basically, medical marijuana regulations were implemented a couple years ago in California. And of course, Prop 64 is being implemented. The recreational legalization law is being implemented as we speak. January 1st, legal retail sales began. There's been a lot of growing pains. We've chronicled a lot of those growing pains here on Cannabis News. Nearly 1,000 individual cannabis businesses have been sent cease and desist letters or emails by California regulators during an ongoing enforcement process, a first step in a long effort to ensure the state's industry is fully regulated and operating like those in more mature markets. According to a list obtained by Marijuana Business Daily, as of April 4th, the California Bureau of Cannabis Control, the BCC, had sent cease and desist letters or emails to at least 954 businesses that the agency identified as potentially operating without full legal permission. You see the chart there. They break down by city. For instance, Los Angeles has 47 state licensed retailers and delivery services, but they have 233 businesses got cease and desist letters. In Anaheim and Costa Mesa, California, there's 0 state licensed retails and delivery services, but 33 and 20 respectively businesses were sent cease and desist letters. In other words, the number of companies operating without a license for whatever reason is much more than the companies that are operating with a license under the new medical marijuana and retail regimes. It's difficult to ascertain where many of the operators are actually based, since the Bureau's list doesn't include addresses or even regions for 341 of the companies. The Bay Area, 94 recipients in the Bay Area and surrounding towns got cease and desist letters. Over 230 businesses in Los Angeles proper were sent cease and desist letters, nearly 5 times the number of state licensed retailers in the city, as we just mentioned. And there's various reasons for a lot of these businesses. Some of them just don't want to. They don't want to be regulated. They don't want to be taxed. They don't have to deal with any of that, but it looks like they're going to have to. Some of them are having trouble getting local approval. The patchwork of approval around California is still pretty sparse. Most counties and towns and cities have not allowed or not allowing marijuana sales and retail businesses or dispensary businesses. So, and you can't get a state license until you get a local license. So they're in limbo there. A lot of people have just not gotten around to turning in their paperwork. As this story points out, there's a lot of companies that are licensed, but they got letters by mistake. It's a long. I've said this before about all these programs. It's a long road. They have a lot to get done. They are encouraged by the responses. So far, people have been slowly trickling in. That they're going to get regulatory compliant. They're going to shut down or whatever they're going to do. And there's just a lot of growing pains. I know it's a very cliche phrase, but it is for a reason, as are most cliches. Excuse me. There'll be a lot of growing pains with this program. And a lot of people have been used to, in California at least, operating without a license, operating without regulation. And now they're being told that, well, here comes a ton of regulation, and you're going to have to follow it, or you're going to have to go out of business. So far, you get almost 500 licensed businesses and almost 1,000 cease and desist letters. And those numbers will slowly, eventually the licensed businesses will surpass the number of unlicensed businesses, and they'll continue to grow apart until most businesses, if not all, are operating with licenses. Which, if you're a big regulation person, that's the goal. Personally, I don't care if they have regulations. I would make it legal for them to open up their doors and sell stuff. And if they don't do it right, well, they'll pay for it in the marketplace. But that's not the way things are going to be. Obviously, there's going to be heavy regulation, heavy taxation when it comes to legalization, which I'm not a fan of, but it's better than prohibition. It's the mantra of those who have to settle for what the government will give them. It's better than prohibition. This last story is from Tallahassee.com. Judge gives green light for Tampa strip club owner to grow marijuana. Now, the fact that he's a strip club owner actually has nothing to do with the story, but it makes for, a good title, because this makes it more interesting. The guy used to own a strip club. A Tallahassee judge gave the okay to Tampa entrepreneur Joe Redner to grow his own pot to treat cancer, prompting state health officials to immediately appeal a decision that could open the door to more legal skirmishes over Florida's medical marijuana regulations. If you've been following what's been going on in Florida, or if you're a regular listener to this show or watcher of this show, you know that Florida's had a lot of problems, as have just about all the states have legalized, either medically or recreationally. There's been a lot of problems, to say the least. Leon County Circuit Judge Karen Grievers ruled that the 77-year-old Redner, who made his fortune as a strip club owner, again, has nothing to do with the story, but it's an interesting tidbit, can grow his own marijuana because state rules prohibit Florida medical marijuana operators from selling whole plants or flowers. Redner's doctor ordered a juicing treatment that uses live marijuana plants to prevent a relapse of stage 4 lung cancer, according to court documents. The Constitution says what it says, and the judge recognized what I've been saying all along. The Department of Health and the legislature can't take away the rights that the Constitution gives you, Redner said in a statement. Redner's lawyer, Luke Larotte, argued that a voter-approved constitutional amendment broadly authorizing medical marijuana, quote, unambiguously allows, end quote, the Tampa man to follow his doctor's recommended method of taking the pot treatment. Redner is forced to grow his own plants and make the liquid treatment because the Department of Health hasn't allowed any marijuana operators to sell whole plants, Larotte argued, and the Department of Health of Florida has really been slow. If you've been following, again, what's been going on in Florida or been listening and watching this show, the Department of Health of Florida has been incredibly slow and incompetent at getting medical marijuana regulations implemented. Until and unless the department stops violating its constitutional duty and adopts the mandated presumptive regulation, the evidence clearly demonstrates that Mr. Redner is entitled to follow the recommendations of a certified physician under Florida law and to possess, grow, and use his own medical marijuana plants in a secure manner so he will have access to medical marijuana which he's entitled under the amendment, Judge Grievers wrote. The state's request to block Grievers' decision, which the judge wrote applies only to Redner at this point, comes as no surprise. According to Adam Eland, Redner's partner in a business called Floragrown, Floragrown filed a separate marijuana-related lawsuit in Tallahassee next year. Wednesday's decision also telegraphs what Judge Grievers may do in a separate lawsuit initiated by John Morgan, the Orlando trial lawyer who largely bankrolled what is known as Amendment 2, the constitutional amendment approved by more than 72% of Florida voters in 2016. In that case, Kathy Jordan and other parties are challenging a state law passed during a special session last year that carries out the amendment and, among other things, bans patients from smoking marijuana. They argue that because the amendment itself specifically banned public smoking, that it implies that private smoking should be allowed. So, and this is the judge apparently in that case as well. So the judge, at least going by this decision, seems favorable to Florida medical marijuana. So we'll see if that continues. And getting in some disses against the Florida Department of Health, that was pretty good too. But it's true. They've done nothing, almost nothing. We did a story several weeks ago about the committee that's overseeing this in the Florida legislature, reaming these people from the Department of Health, saying we've been sending you letters for 4 months and you've said nothing to us about what you're doing, and then you come and tell us that we got some problems, we can't delay anymore. If you guys want to delay us more, it's going to screw everything up. And horrible Florida Department of Health. It's regulations. It's what you do. That's your job, is to create regulations. Just do it. Just do it. This judge basically said, well, this guy, he's waiting on you guys. You're not doing anything. He's doing it himself, and he's allowed to do that. Because he's allowed under the amendment that passed, that you guys, just because you guys haven't got your act together and got regulations, doesn't mean this guy should suffer. Which is true. Anyway, we'll continue to follow this story and many more. We're a little over a week now from 420. That's crazy. Keep sharing and liking and all of that, commenting on these videos. Help us spread the truth about cannabis. Check out marijuanatimes.org. We're awesome over there. Check out naturesidecannabis.com as well. They're awesome and a sponsor of Cannabis News with Joe Klare. It's April 12th, 2018. Go check out naturesidecannabis.com, and we'll see you all tomorrow for the last show of the week here on Cannabis News.